Thanks, Darren. Might I just say you've been performing a stellar performance as MC. We tried to get him last year, but he was too privacy conscious. Didn't want to dox himself. Okay, guys, so panel on layer 2. So I'm going to have a couple of general questions that I'm going to throw out to you guys, and I think we just, if anyone's got something interesting to say on it, or even not that interesting, just let's have a chat about it. I'm going to start general, and then we'll kind of narrow it down after that. So the opening thing I want to discuss is why layer 2? You know, people might say, why do we need layer 2 when Bitcoin fees are now sub 1 sat per byte? Like, why do we need layer 2? I don't know. Gareth, do you want to open with this?
Yeah, sure. Well, I did this thing the other day. You know, if there's a button there that you can press, and once you press the button, you immediately replace the current fiat system with a Bitcoin system. You know, all the connections, everything. If we did that and we press that button, the world stops. It simply stops because Bitcoin won't break. Bitcoin will work exactly as it's designed to work, but it'll cost you a fortune to get a transaction in the block, and it simply cannot scale to that level. So we need to look at what is it that we need replacing? We're not just replacing a money. We need to replace the financial systems. And financial systems have a lot of things that are connected to money, but it's not money. And this is why I think we need layer 2s. We need layers that do different things, that can replace the day-to-day payment mechanism, that can replace the way mutual funds work, the way equity funds work. So I think there's lots of different things that you need to be able to do in a complete monetary system, which you simply can't do just with Bitcoin, but you can anchor all of it in Bitcoin.
Yeah. Generally, if this whole Bitcoin project is supposed to be successful, the fees for transaction needs to be way higher than they are right now. So if the fees are in 20 years what they are right now, or anywhere below $50 for a transaction, we've probably completely failed anyways, as this is gonna like compromise our foundational security assumption that eventually like the mining fees will pay, or the transaction fees will pay exclusively for the miners. Yeah, that's one thing. And there's like other like smaller things that are still like very advantageous of like Lightning, for example, such that as a receiver you have more control of which payments you accept and which you don't. The way Bitcoin works, where you have like a static identifier that you can pay repeatedly, is very practical in some cases, but for an invoicing system or a point of sale system, it's horrible. Yeah, because people, they can send funds to you that you can't return, you can't cancel them. You can't prevent them from it. So for an operator, that's quite unpractical.
Yeah, I think that's basically it. If we want to build like a full financial system, we need more expressivity, which on Bitcoin itself is just not possible because of its very limited scripting language, where you can potentially express anything actually, but the amount of opcodes, or you would need then, you could just not fit that into a block, and in general to scale the whole thing. I think that's the main 2 points.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So this brings me to our next point. So I think we all still have PTSD from the block wars. And you know, that was where I first really got involved in the technical side of Bitcoin and understanding why like big blocks personally for me is not the solution here. So this begs the question of like, what is the trade-offs though between, if you're going to go for scaling Bitcoin in layers instead of scaling it with bigger blocks, like what's the trade-off then between like a layer 2 and layer 1? So let's keep it tight. So let's say between Lightning and Bitcoin, like what are those trade-offs that come with scaling in a layer?
Well, Lightning is very complicated. So while, especially to implement, while Bitcoin at least has like somewhat of an elegant design to it, Lightning is just absolute complexity porn. And yeah, it's just, you need, I think, to like maintain and advance like any Lightning implementation, you need like 10 good full-time paid devs. So that runs you like $3 million a year just in wages. very few companies can sustain it, and I think right now the only ones that really can sustain it is LDK, while the rest is kind of like fizzling out, and you have issues that are open for years. That's a big problem. Bitcoin used to be much simpler in the beginning, especially. You could get a working system that was maintained by a couple of part-time people. Yeah, that's a big downside. Fedimint, for example, is also quite complicated, though I wouldn't call it a layer 2 just for the protocol. But yeah, so you get additional complexity on top. But I mean, the lesson from the block size wars was that bigger blocks are just a non-starter because you compromise on decentralization. So you really, there's no other way to meaningfully scale here.
Yeah, and the second issue that comes with scaling in layers is how do you get from the base chain to the layer itself? Yeah, and there we have different models where you either, for example, have a federation like we have in Liquid and in Rootstock, which now might be swapped kind of for a so-called BitVM based bridge where we at least get from an like T of N federation trust assumption to a 1 of N trust assumption. And yeah, for example, in ARC, a user has always a unilateral exit, so they can go back to Bitcoin, but the amount of transactions, for example, might be in quite a high ballpark that you need to push on chain. And if we are in such a fee environment that Joscha mentioned that we actually need to sustain to sustain Bitcoin in itself, then the question is how useful are these unilateral exits, for example. Yeah? So in general, we need to figure out how we can securely go into the other system, into the site system, and how to specifically go back, especially if something on the site system goes wrong.
Yeah, I think for me it's we could say there's trade-offs, but I think what happens is we think of transactions per second, and I don't think that's the real innovation. Yeah, I think the idea that you extending rather than making bigger. So instead of you extending the functionality of Bitcoin in order to make it a real financial tool that anchors all these other services. So I think there's different trade-offs between the different layer 2s because they don't have the exact same goal. Some of them do things, they have the same goal, but they do it in a different way. But in terms of the layer 2s, the trade-offs, I wouldn't say there's real trade-offs between the base layer and the layer 2s because I think the function is different. They serve a different purpose.
Right, but so I guess what I mean by that is, so if I hold my private keys for Bitcoin layer 1, I'm fully sovereign. I have those private keys, those sats belong to me. No one else can access that. With layer 2 like Lightning, for example, I mean, I don't know if who of you guys in the crowd have tried to run your own Lightning node and lost sats doing so. It's difficult. It's really difficult. I mean, I know Liquid's not a layer 2, it's like a layer 1.5. That's much simpler, but you still don't get the same guarantees. Ultimately, there's a federation of companies, and it's a multi-sig, and like, you're not fully sovereign in that system. With Lightning, you can run self-custodial Lightning, and then sure, you are to some degree. But it's more in order to scale, we have to have some kind of trade-off in terms of sovereignty, right? And I suppose that's what the different projects are trying to achieve. Like, how can you maximize sovereignty while also still scaling? And so that before I get onto the Arc Spark Lightning question, I actually want to we spoke about high fees, in the future, and I think we all agree that that's critical for Bitcoin's security budget is to have, high fees at some point. But what about layer 2 in a world of low fees, which we're at right now? Like, does that delay adoption of layer 2 and delay development on layer 2? I mean, Joshua, what do you think about the kind of environment that we're in at the moment?
Well, it does delay it. I think it's human nature to really sit on a problem and do absolutely nothing about it until it blows up in your face. A bit of history is there that I think like Fedimint like really was developed in a higher fee environment than now, and then like shipped in a very high fee environment that was sustained, I think, for like 6 months, 8 months, something like that. And I actually at the time was wondering if we ever see like the fees as low as they are now. So I didn't think we would. Yeah, me neither. But yeah, it is definitely. I think it has definitely like lessened the interest right now. And especially before, you could already see, like you could see as well that a lot of people were going for like, they were going for like non-custodial Lightning wallets on the phone, and working on like all kinds of very like impressive work on the technical challenges of like making this like somewhat viable today. But I always thought that no matter how good you can make this, at the end of the day, you need to open a channel for every onboarding, and that's just like not workable for like where I'm trying to go here, which is global adoption. So I never like found it that interesting, and I found it quite a peculiar example of human nature, how people were so like invested and focused on those kinds of solutions. Yeah. So I was like quite fond of efforts like Fedimint even then. Yeah, for that reason, for the long-term view.
Nothing to add.
Yeah, I think the innovation is there, and I think it'll keep growing. We've seen quite a lot of that happen in the last 6 to 8 months. It's probably been the most that's been happening has been in the last 6 to 8 months. I mean, Lightning was effectively useless for all intents and purposes as a real thing up until the Spark and Arc and that type of stuff started happening. I mean, now it's a whole different thing. So I think the use cases is also different. We've got Liquid, for example, which you mentioned, and then you've got new innovations like Botanics that is effectively the similar model to Liquid, but it's a dynamic federation. So there's little incremental advantage or improvements, and somewhere somebody sparks something. You can't just build from nothing to something. You've got to build off some other people.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't shit on Lightning too much. My company, we do cross-border payments, and I've been doing it on Lightning for the past year, and the volume that we can move via Lightning is incredible. And we actually had a call with one of the developers from a big LSP, and we were like, guys, you need to beef up your channels. Like, we're moving volume here. And they're like, Lightning is for micropayments. And we were like, no, it's not. It's for whatever we want it to be. And we want to do macro payments on it. And like, it's handling it. And it's great. But the question, it does beg the question, though, in a low fee environment, is it worth the headache of the complexity to do that when you could just send on chain for like a really cheap fee? I mean, that's kind of a rhetorical question, I guess. But the real question I actually have about the cheap fees is why? Why are fees so low right now? And is that because layer 2s are actually successful? And is that because there's a lot of volume moving across Lightning right now than private channels that people don't know about? But like, there's not less people using Bitcoin than there were 5 years ago. I mean, Veronica, do you have any insights on this?
I think it is difficult to track how much volume there is on all layer 2s together, but I think it was a year or maybe even a year and a half ago that River published a report about the estimate of the volume on Lightning, and it was actually rather low. I think it was in the ballpark of around 5,000 Bitcoin or something like that. It doesn't look like in general that Bitcoin is used. Sorry, don't shoot the messenger. That Bitcoin is used too much for payments at the moment as a medium of exchange. But I want to expand also on the first point that you said, if we have this low fee environment, do we even need layer 2s? But I mean, I think in general, for sure, we need to plan ahead. And the complexity of these layer 2s, if we look back, like I think a Rootstock, they started developing on its sidechain in 2014 or something like that, 2013. And just like 3 years ago, the idea of BitVM came around the corner. So to see how we can improve like a federated bridge, kind of, that took like a decade. So the whole R&D behind that is very deep, cryptographical, very cryptographically based, and it doesn't just the knowledge is not just accumulated in like a year or two. So we definitely need to plan ahead and develop into different directions also, because sometimes we don't really know if these solutions actually work and what kind of bugs or whatnot they bring with it. So I think it's definitely worth it building now, even in a low fee environment, and see where we can get from there.
I also think, like, right now a lot of the like traffic that goes over Lightning would probably not be there at all if like Lightning wasn't there. So it's not like it would move over to Bitcoin. And I think right now the value proposition for Lightning is often not so much like saving on fees, but also the speed. And also, as like one of the things I mentioned earlier already, that you have like a native invoicing system where you have full control over this. For like the individual user, something like Bitcoin with like static identifiers and like push payments is much more like natural and practical. And we spent like years in the Bitcoin system, in the Bitcoin development, to like replicate this payment, this experience on Lightning. Kind of always like therefore the like invoice flow was always framed as like clunky and just a headache and just like an implementation detail that no one really wants. But I think if you're running a business, that actually works very well for you, and it works much better than the like native Bitcoin flow. And also the downsides of Lightning, which means you need to always be online, manage liquidity, etc. They are much more natural to a business. So like setting up a Lightning node in like, if you have someone with technical expertise, 20 minutes, you know, and then being able to like just automatically handle payments, I think is a huge benefit. And it is so much simpler than integrating with existing like, with existing fiat systems, which are incredibly fragmented. So I can imagine for you, like handling your fiat payments as a business is probably like 50 times more work than like handling the Lightning payments. I was talking to the Moneybaker people earlier about how they are set up, and they really just threw like one LND node in the cloud, and then other nodes like started opening channel to them while they had like the incoming payments. And if they're just receiving payments, and once, you know, the channels, they fill up, they just like loop it out automatically. So for them, like they can just automate this. They've basically no work with this, and they're like one LND node like has been receiving payments for like years without any issues. It never goes down. There are never any issues. So I think that's a huge leap. It's much easier to get started on it as a developer. I think Lightning is very, very difficult to build, but then building on Lightning is actually not that difficult. So I set up an LDK node earlier this year, and the quality of LDK is great. This is the one I can speak the most to. And like, it is even sufficient to just open a single inbound channel, and then it's like, you can start routing payments. So you are very, very quickly set up. Yeah,
I think the main thing there was that I would add is that the price, the fees is one thing, but the functionality and the speed is another thing. You know, we've seen a lot of the DeFi stuff happening where, you know, you're feeding interest to people in Satoshis, and if you had to do that on Bitcoin, it wouldn't work. So there's functionality, and that faster confirmation is important.
Yeah, I mean, to expand on what all of you have said, they're like, my business would not be possible without Lightning. Like we do cross-border payments, and like if we had to do it on-chain, we would have to wait for 3 confirmations, and the volatility in the Bitcoin price would destroy any of our margin during that time, and people would end up receiving less money than they sent, and you'd have an absolute shit show. So we couldn't do it. And the other thing, and this is why I think the volume on Lightning is much higher than it's actually publicly reported because you've got private nodes, private channels, and public channels. Last week, 2 Fridays ago, we handled a payment from Nigeria to South Africa. It was multiple payments in quick succession of 6 Bitcoin that got sent. That in total, but it was across 20 payments, but in the space of about 40 minutes. But that 6 Bitcoin didn't show up anywhere. So if anyone writing a report on that, they can look at public channels. They can't see what's happening privately because that was all within our own infrastructure. So, but that value moved from Nigeria to South Africa, right? And that was because of Lightning. So I don't think anyone knows how much value is actually moving through Lightning. And to expand on your point, what you said, to build on top of Lightning is actually quite easy. It creates all these use cases. You can now compete with Swift. That was not possible. You couldn't compete with Swift on Bitcoin. I mean, you sort of can, I guess, but you run into issues. If you don't have instant settlement, you can't do really tight margin trades, essentially. Okay, so Tyron, how are we doing for time there? What have we got in total? 17 minutes left. Oh, left. Okay, cool. Okay, great. So then I want to get into Lightning, the L2s. So Lightning versus Arc versus Spark, and I'd like to talk about Fedimints as well here as well. So we've discussed Lightning now for the past few minutes. So just who'd like to give us an overview of Arc and who would like to give us an overview of Spark? I think you could do Fedimint. That'll probably be the best. Which one do you want to do, Gareth?
Yeah, I guess Arc is probably the interesting one for me, which I like. So the guys from Arcade actually ran a server at the Honey Badger conference last year, I think in August, September somewhere. And effectively the whole conference was using Lightning, making Lightning payments, but nobody knew that they were actually running on Arcade. It was actually on Arc. So ultimately, they've got a different approach where they have virtual UTXOs. So their model of not creating a specific chain, an additional chain, is just a different way of approaching how you can scale Bitcoin and Bitcoin solutions. And the first use case was payments on Lightning. That was the sort of simple first thing. But they've gone and expanded, and I think they're releasing assets in a couple of weeks. So again, they're building out this network of financial services and infrastructure to build financial services on top, which ultimately sits on Bitcoin.
And so with Arc, do you require channel management like you do with Lightning?
No, you simply hold the Arc token and send it on Lightning. So you can just pay a Lightning invoice effectively with the Arc token, and there's almost no fees. It's like a fraction.
Does Arc require Lightning to function though?
No.
So
No.
Runs on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Arc itself, it doesn't need Lightning to function, but for example, if we have different Arc instances, to go from one Arc instance to another, we would use Lightning. Same as if we go from a Fedimint to Arc or whatnot, we would swap out, use Lightning as the connective tissue, and then swap into the other system on the other side. And to your question regarding Spark and Arc, I think both. So on one hand, the off-chain payments work in quite a similar manner, actually, that you kind of have you kind of pass on in Arc. They are called VTXOs. I don't know, in Spark they're called Spark TXOs. I'm not perfectly sure, but both systems have a different upside. So on Spark, for example, it's based on a so-called state chain where you pass on these UTXOs in an off-chain environment by giving just a key share of that UTXO to another user. And the second key share for signing is held by the operator. But this key share itself in Spark is federated. So the Spark entity cannot a Spark operator, which consists of many entities, cannot just screw over a user. So it's not just one entity. Whereas in Arc, this is a bit of a downside at the moment for both companies working on that in the off-chain environment, it's just one entity signing off together with the user to pass on that VTXO. But both companies are looking also into federating the operator, for example, via nested music, and Arc Labs, where putting the signer itself in a trusted execution environment to increase the security. A big upside of Arc, though, is that what you can do at any time is that you kind of anchor your VTXO to Bitcoin itself by participating in a so-called settlement or batch settlement. Where once you participate in something like that, your funds are fully secure, you have a direct unilateral or kind of direct unilateral exit, and no one can take the funds from you. This possibility you don't have in Spark. What I think is another thing that is interesting about these two systems, while they're non-custodial, but there are some trust trade-offs with the operator. The operator can never rug all the users at the same time, kind of like it is in Wallet of Satoshi, where potentially Wallet of Satoshi could just take all the funds and gone. An operator could just rug like one VTXO or one Spark TXO at a time, kind of. There are some caveats to this, but that's roughly kind of the model. Quickly, but the thing is they would need to collude with a previous owner of one of these VTXOs, but one has to add that the operator itself could insert itself into a transaction chain and then kind of rug many VTXOs at the same time, but that's a lot more effort than what we see in traditional custodial solutions.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of like framing this as a comparison. So I would say compared to Arc, Fediments are much simpler for the sole reason that they are clearly custodial. There's no unilateral exit proposition in any way, shape, or form. If you want to get more security out of your Fediment, you need to like increase the number of guardians, which works rather well. So you can have like 7 out of 10 or 11 out of 15. And the system will still be fast and performant and feel very much like Blink. So there's not really an additional latency for having like more like a higher number of guardians. You can go up to 20 if you want to, but probably the sweet spot is like around like 5 to 7 and 7 out of 10. The idea with Fediments is also that the individual Fediments are smaller and we have more of them, while I think the arcs are designed to be larger and you only have a few. That's why we focus with Fediments, we focus on making them like as simple to host as possible, which then hopefully also leads to people having like a personal trust assumption to their group of guardians. So it's a very different model. And mentally, it's always a custodian with a multisig. Yeah, so it's very clearly like who has control. There would be a 3 out of 4, 5 out of 7, 7 out of 10 multisig with like all variants in between are possible. Yeah, we have great privacy. That's one of the trade-offs that we get for like relieving you of the custody, which might or might not for some people be actually more favorable in practice. Yeah, and we get pretty good UX because it is custodial. So it feels like an eCash wallet feels very much, or like a Fediment wallet feels very much like Blink, basically. Yeah, very fast Lightning payments, no real additional downsides to it. Yeah, besides the engineering work, yeah, maybe similar there to Lightning. Building it is quite complicated, but using it not so much.
Yeah, I think for anyone who's used a Fedi wallet or Fediment itself, I mean, we set up our own federation, relatively simple to set up. You know, if you've got the right hardware, it's a very trivial thing to do. And what I really like about the model is it's much more organic in how humans actually function. You know, at a human level, like you have trusted relationships with people. That's how life works. And so it actually builds on that natural state of how humans function to, okay, let's entrust people we know to protect our value. We do it with banks already, and I don't think banking as a concept is necessarily bad. I think fractional reserve banking is obviously terrible, but you know, the concept of having people that you know and trust in your community look after your money is a reasonable thing to do. So I think like the Fediment model kind of works well in that way. And like you say, the UX is great and it's compatible with Lightning wallets. Like I use it all the time. It's great. So
yeah, I would add one more thing to how the system works. So of course Fediment supports Lightning because otherwise what's the point? But running a federation doesn't require you to run a gateway or run a Lightning node. You need someone that runs a so-called like Lightning gateway, which is like special Fediment software on top of a running Lightning node, and they will provide Lightning service to your federation, like take a sliver of fees off there, etc., etc. So as a guardian, or the operator of the federation, you really only set it up once, and then the system is kind of chugging along. We set up a federation in South Africa 2 months ago, and since then the Fediment project has been actually running a gateway and supporting them with Lightning liquidity. But this is completely untrusted, and the operators don't have to do anything really. So the higher level point here is that the system splits service from trust. So the service here is actually quite or relatively work intensive, maybe like a few hours a month to keep it running, while the trust is basically no effort. So yeah, I think that's a pretty useful split. And also we support like an M of N model there. So a gateway can support multiple federations, and multiple gateways can support the same federation. So somewhere like down here, you might have like 10 federations which have on average like 7 guardians, but you would only have like 2 or 3 gateways. There's not much benefit to more than 2, like just as a fallover. But then you would have like 70 custodians and 2 Lightning operators, so 2 Lightning nodes supporting them. While you have like very, very good fault tolerance. So if one of the gateways goes offline, the client, they will switch over immediately. You don't even notice it. You can seamlessly migrate between them. You spin up the new one, add it to it, and it will be picked up by the clients right away. So you have like a lot of benefits that are like quite useful in practice. People don't think about this. But you have very practical like concerns when you're like actually trying to run something for real. Another one is that like the 5 out of 7 multisig is actually, or the 3 out of 4 multisig is always considered as like preventing someone stealing your funds. But in practice, operator error is actually like much more likely way to mess up. And so, like as a Fediment guardian, you can sleep quite well because your own node is not that important. It's easy to back up. You have static backup, so the hardware itself is kind of like throwaway. Like if someone steals your guardian machine, whatever it is, like a Start9, etc., it breaks, your house gets flooded. It doesn't matter. It's like not that important. You can just recover it. So it's much simpler to operate than like a Lightning node. And yeah, I think it's just in practice actually quite workable. Yeah, we can run on Start9s, for example, which wouldn't be possible with like a federated system because again, the individual guardian is not that important.
Okay, so my next question, I guess, is more for Gareth, and this is, how do you curate a simple UX on a layer 2? So Gareth, you're building layers wallet, and if you're building a retail customer-facing wallet, like UX is mission critical, right? Yeah. And as we've just been discussing for half an hour, Lightning itself is very complicated. And so like, obviously now there's Arc and there's Spark, we get a simplified natively UX, but how do you go about it in curating that UX on your wallet?
Yeah, look, we've got a guy that we've got a guy, and some of the stuff we've come across, even I go, no, this is fantastic, and then he'll come back later and say, yeah, but this is going to be a problem down the line. I'm going, no, it's fine, and then it becomes a problem down the line. So there's no easy answer. The main thing is the user experience to get to the point where they want to be fast. But because the different layers offer such different functionality and utility, it's incredibly difficult. So the way we approached it was we treat each layer as a visual, it's its own thing. You try and keep some of the stuff some of the stuff in the same place, and everyone's got a different approach on why and how. And like, we've literally just had an argument for the last week over moving the send and receive and transfer to the middle of the screen. So, look, there is no easy answer. I think what we're going to see going forward is, I think UI is going to become a lot more fluid. People will be moving towards a sort of AI approach where they're actually communicating, and each person's interface will be custom to them. So I think it's been a big problem, but I don't think there's an easy solution to that problem. I think the solution will come from the next iteration, where we've got a much more dynamic UI for everything. I think that's going to be the main solution to that.
Back-end devs.
I did actually write a wallet myself all the last couple of months, another Fediment wallet. But yeah, I can't add much to that personal experience. There is UI development opens up endless bike shedding, and I don't know how important it is, where the button is exactly placed. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the button placement is not so much the thing. It's if you take let's take the most simple example, I guess, of multi-layer wallets, which is Aqua or Bull wallet, right? Where you've got on-chain, and then you've got Liquid, and you've got Lightning. So they've broken it up into your check and your savings account, right? So you've got your spending wallets and your savings wallets, and that's relatively simple. But now when you start adding layer 3s in, you start adding different assets in, you start adding layer 2s that function slightly differently, that is going to be a really difficult thing to do. And I think, Gareth, your answer about one UI fits all is probably a bad idea is probably the great way to go about it. If you have an AI interface that can curate the experience for the individual user, because people are different and people experience things differently, that's probably the way to go. But the technical side of it, how you make these things work together, I think that's really, really going to be difficult. I don't know if you guys got anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. The technical side seems to be the easy thing, to be honest with you. It's the interaction of the different functions and the different functionality around it. Because, so for an example, we've got a USD layer that can receive from any USD network. So Tron, Ethereum, it can receive from anywhere and it can send to anywhere. But you can also hold it on rootstock or USDT on Liquid. So there's all these different things, and ultimately the only way we could figure out how to do it is, we're going to build it and make it work where you can see everything, and then the next step would be to hide everything and to let the user go in the settings and choose which one they want to be their default, how they want this thing. Do I want to select a network to receive it on every time, or do I just want it to think by itself? Because the problem is not just that you have these different layers with different functionalities. The problem is also that users will be using them in a different way. Some people want yield, so they're going to want to just look at one layer, and that's the one they're interested in. So you need to be able to then disable the others. Right. So this is why I'm saying I think the sort of next generation curated AI, that's where I think it'll go.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, guys, Tyron, how are we doing on time there? Just finished. Okay, so I'm going to be sneaky and open the floor to anyone got any questions? Tyron, got a question?
Yeah, I'm not on your guys' level with the second layers and layer 2s and all that, but I've just got a basic Lightning question. Do we know what's the maximum amount we can send on the Lightning network, in a single transaction? Is there an easy answer to that, or what's the most your company's done?
Yeah, so I can only speak from our experience. When we started building this, we were running into bottlenecks quite often around $5,000-$10,000, and then it's very, very much a case of okay, cool, you just need to increase channel capacity, right? With Lightning, that's pretty easy. You just create a bigger channel, send more Bitcoin to it, and that solved that bottleneck. The issue we have, and this is not so much well, for Lightning, it's just a channel capacity. Where you're sending to, how big are the channels, that determines how much you can send. The issue is that if you want to send high frequency payments and they're going in one direction, you run into issues where you constantly have to open new channels or rebalance channels, right? So for example, if we're sending funds from Nigeria to South Africa, but we're not sending funds from South Africa to Nigeria, it's just flowing in one direction. So you're just constantly depleting the one side of the channel. And that doesn't really work so well. Ideally, you want to have them balanced going in both directions. And then you can put, let's say, 1 Bitcoin in the channel, and it goes backwards and forwards, and you can send up to 1 Bitcoin. That works fine. So yeah, having bidirectional flows makes the operation of that a lot easier. But in reality, where we ran into limits is on the fiat side. So you send, because it's very easy to speak to your LSP and say, please can you increase your channel size. They do that. There's no real cost associated for us to that. But you can't phone up the Reserve Bank and say, can you guys please let us send more than whatever your limit is. Those things are hard coded. And the other thing is the banking system runs 5 days a week from 6 to 3. It's ridiculous in South Africa. So between 6 a.m. and 3 a.m. you can send a certain amount, and after 3 p.m. you can send 4 times less than that, and on weekends and on public holidays. It's outrageous. But so this is actually where you run into the issue. So we scaled past the Lightning limitations. Like we solved those problems very quickly, and then we ran into the fiat limitations, and those limitations can't really be fixed because the fiat system sucks. So, like I said, we sent 6 Bitcoin no problem the other day, and the reason why we didn't send it in 1 transaction, because we could have, the channel was big enough. The reason we had to send it in 20 transactions is because the customer in Nigeria started sending after 3 p.m. and the limit is 250,000 rand per transfer in South Africa after 3 p.m. So we had to send 20 times 250k, or more than 20. So that's really the issue there.
Yeah, this reminds me of a talk by like Alan Farrington that he like lately gave, where he was saying the gist was that the Lightning seems very complicated if you haven't seen the fiat system before. So as I was earlier giving the example of like 10 full-time engineers for like a Lightning implementation, that's a drop in the bucket compared to a company that handles like a large amount of fiat payments, which has probably hundreds of people in compliance and etc. And they basically, like those guys, like 10 guys could build the entire global Lightning system as it runs right now.
Zero compliance people.
Yeah, so it's like orders of magnitude less effort than like the current than the current fiat system. And what's also often not understood is you have like immediate settlement as well. So not just the payment is not just set up quick, but it's also settled right away. While in the existing fiat system, you have this like setup and settlement split, where the payment is sometimes only like settled like days later. So you have you have the conceptual split. You might have chargebacks. Then it's a whole headache again for businesses that the consumer doesn't see. But the business really does see, yeah.
You hear me? So there's I see in the last few years the amount of Lightning wallets has increased quite a lot. So there's obviously a need for lots of different Lightning wallets. How do you market yourself, given the fact that there's so many? Like I can choose. I mean, I probably have like 5 on my phone, and I probably use Blink the most. I test the others. Are there not too many? And how do you market yourself?
That's a communist question.
Yeah, look, I think you're right. There's loads of Lightning wallets. It's really down to what users need. A lot of the stuff that we're thinking of doing is not specifically Lightning. I don't think Lightning or Spark or Botanics or any of these layers are winners or losers. We want to take this sort of, in what we're doing, we're taking the sort of Switzerland approach where, there's currently 83 Bitcoin layer 2 projects, of which about 10 have got traction. And our approach is just to add everything on there, and I think we've got a fairly decent user interface that looks nice and actually works quite easily. So it's slightly different from what the other Lightning wallets do, because most of them are sort of layer specific. Aqua, for example, it's a block. It's a liquid wallet, really. The X versus Stack. So our approach was more to build something that we can add functionality for users and give them the option to switch on what they like and switch off what they don't. So I wouldn't say that we're a Lightning wallet. I think that's just one of the features, the fact that we've got Lightning and that you can use it on there.
Okay, great, guys. I think we're out of time, so we're going to wrap it there. I just want to give a big thanks to the guys who joined on the panel here. Thank you so much. Fantastic chat, and I hope everyone got something useful from this.